The Vietnam protest movement was a movement against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. In 1964, when the movement began, there were three groups who had three different stances on the war. There was the National Liberation Front, which fought the United States and South Vietnamese government in South Vietnam, liberals, who encouraged the establishment of a democratic government and thus supported the war, and pacifists, who were the core of the Vietnam protest movement. Beginning in December of 1964 with a 25,000-person march on Washington, D.C., the movement only grew larger as the war waged on. The International War Crimes Tribunal was an organization that exposed the United States military's use of illegal chemical weapons such as Agent Orange and napalm, and found that the military was torturing both enemy soldiers and innocent civilians. When these atrocities were revealed to the public, the United States military was compared to the Nazi regime in World War II. From here, protests only became more extreme. In November of 1965, Norman Morrison burned himself to death in protest, prompting two more people to do the same. The U.S. military instituted a draft that forced people to fight in the war regardless of whether or not they supported it. In protest, David Miller publicly burned his own draft card and was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Other people followed Miller's example and burned their draft cards as well. In 1968, students of Columbia University in New York occupied the university's administrative office until police forced them off the campus. Later, these students also targeted a chemical weapons manufacturing facility as a protesting site. Problems were especially evident in the military, with drug abuse, combat refusals, and racial issues prominent throughout squads of soldiers. Between the years of 1960 and 1973, 503,926 soldiers deserted their military posts in Vietnam. Some soldiers went so far as killing their commanding officers. Veterans threw away the medals they had been awarded for their service in the war and apologized for tearing Vietnam apart. The Vietnam Veterans Against the War organization was formed to protest the war and its atrocities committed toward the Vietnamese people and continues to promote peace and the well-being of wartime veterans. When the declination in support for the Vietnam War became mainstream, musicians began to get involved. Using dark humor, tongue-in-cheek lyrics, and outright satire, songs were produced about the government's twisted tactics in the Vietnam War and spread word about the government's lies to its citizens. Two of roughly 100 songs that came out of these protests were I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag by Country Joe McDonald of Country Joe and the Fish in 1965 and Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie in 1967. I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag is a song that features dark humor and tongue-in-cheek lyrics. If you are wondering if the Vietnam protest songs were about the music or the message, this song is a clear indication that the songs were all about the message, considering the song itself is said to have been written in just half an hour. The song tells our strong men to put down our books and pick up a gun so we can have a whole lot of fun. We don't care what we fight for and that we are all going to die anyway. Wall Street shouldn't hesitate to make bombs to drop on the Viet Cong. Generals are told to blow all the commies to kingdom come. And at last, parents are told to send their sons off to war as soon as possible so they can be the first to have their boy come home in a box. The underlying message in these lyrics is that the government doesn't care about anything but sending our young men to die fighting communists in Vietnam. It is telling the audience that the government is using you to get what it wants, which is to destroy the communists in Vietnam, and will send you to your death if it means putting a stop to communism. The song is effective in doing this because its bright, upbeat tempo is in stark contrast with the dark, disturbing lyrics of having generals kill all the commies and having sons coming home in boxes. Alice's Restaurant is a great song about the draft in 1965. At the time the song was written, the United States had instated its military draft of young men to be put into action in Vietnam. The entire 18.5-minute song is a musical monologue in which Arlo Guthrie tells a long story about his Thanksgiving in 1965. Over the course of the story, Guthrie is arrested for littering, and in the end, it is revealed that he could not be sent off to war because he had been arrested for littering. At the conclusion of the song, Guthrie urges anyone who faces the draft to walk into a military psychiatrist's office and sing, "You can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant," as a form of protesting the draft. Alice's Restaurant is an effective song because the story is told very well. There are many jokes told throughout, lots of sarcastic humor, and the song as a whole recounts a true story that actually happened to Guthrie. The two songs are similar in some ways, but are at the same time different. Both songs feature upbeat rhythms and melodies and sound happy. They are both about the Vietnam War and protesting it. The two are also satirical in how they mock the government. However, Fixin' to Die is only talking about how bad the war and the United States government are, while Alice's Restaurant focuses more on the draft and actually offers the audience a method by which they can take action against it. Fixin' to Die also has darker, depressing, and disturbing lyrics and imagery, while Restaurant is joking and happy. After listening to Fixin' to Die, you feel gloomy, But Restaurant makes you feel positive about the future after you listen to it. I would have to say that Restaurant is a more effective song because it is more satisfying with the happy ending than Fixin' to Die is with its sad ending. Music was an important part of the Vietnam protest movement because it was able to unite people in ways they hadn't been united before. They could all gather into one place as a large group and listen to people sing about all the problems of the world, and everyone would be in that one place at that one time. There was a great sense of community that came with the protest music. This really got through to America because they were going through the Cold War, a time when everyone was distant from one another, so there was very little sense of being together until this music came along and brought everyone a sense of unity that they had not experienced in a long time.